relics, specifically those of the Prophet Muhammad. Not something you think about every day, right? But when I saw this source book about blessed hairs, well, I had to learn more. How can something like hair, I mean, it's hair, take on such huge importance in a faith?
It's a great question, and you're right. It's not really about the physical hair itself. It's more about what it represents, you know. The love and respect for the Prophet Muhammad in Islam, it extends to anything connected to him, even his hair.
So those blessed hairs, they become like a physical reminder of that connection to him, going all the way back to his lifetime, right?
Exactly. This reverence, this respect for anything connected to the Prophet, it's woven into the very fabric of Islamic history. I mean, his companions would collect his hair after haircuts. It wasn't random either. There's actually evidence of this in the Hadith.
Ah, the Hadith. Those collections of sayings and practices of the Prophet. I'm guessing they hold some clues about how his hair was treated.
Oh, absolutely. Book about blessed hairs actually dives into some of the specific accounts. Like Imam Bukhari, the Hadith scholar, he records a story about Abu Talha. Abu Talha was one of the Prophet's companions, and he was given some of the Prophet's hair as a gift.
That's quite a gift.
And he wasn't just given it to keep. The Prophet specifically told him to distribute it to others.
So it wasn't about keeping the blessing for yourself, but sharing it.
Exactly. This act, it points to the concept of barakah in Islam. This idea that objects associated with holy people carry a kind of divine blessing.
So it's not exactly like a lucky charm, but I can see the comparison.
You got it. It's deeper than that. And, you know, the fascinating thing is that the Prophet actually encouraged his companions to share his hair. It wasn't just something they did. It was something he actively promoted.
Wow. So this wasn't just tolerated. It was almost like encouraged. That really speaks volumes about how important even something as simple as his hair was seen by those around him.
Exactly. And here's another point to consider. Nowhere in the Hadith do we find any record of the Prophet prohibiting the collection of his hair.
So silence implies consent? Sort of.
You could say that. In Islamic jurisprudence, silence on a matter often indicates permissibility. This further strengthens the idea that preserving the Prophet's hair wasn't just okay, it was seen as something positive.
It really shows the weight his followers gave to his actions, to his words, paying attention to every little detail. It's one thing to hold something in high regard, though, and quite another to, well, actually do something with it. Did people use the Prophet's hair beyond just collecting it?
Oh, they definitely did. It wasn't just about collecting it. It was treasured, used in all sorts of aspects of life, for blessings, for healing, even protection.
It reminds me of how other faiths treat relics, you know, like those super valuable artifacts they keep in museums, so carefully handled, with all those rituals around them.
Exactly. But in this case, it goes beyond just history, right? It's the belief that these relics hold a kind of spiritual power, a direct link to the divine.
So what kind of stories are we talking about here? How was the Prophet's hair actually used? Give me some examples from the book.
Okay, well, there's this one about Salma, one of the Prophet's wives. The book explains how she had some of his blessed hairs, and when people were sick or they thought they were cursed, you know, they'd go to her.
Seeking her help, I imagine, her connection to the Prophet.
Yes, and not just because she was his wife, but because of that belief that his blessings, his barakah, it can be transferred through these hairs. Picture this. Salma would take the hairs and dip them into water. And then people would either drink the water or they would bathe in it, hoping for healing, hoping for protection.
It's amazing how something so, well, ordinary, like hair, becomes a channel for such deep faith, for such hope.
It really is. And this belief wasn't just for personal matters either. There's a story in the book about the Prophet's hair being used in war.
Now that you mention it, I think I remember reading about this. Something about a battle, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's the one. This story, it's about Khalid ibn Walid, this legendary military leader. Known for his tactics, his faith, he apparently used to keep some of the Prophet's hair in his battle cap.
For strength, for protection in battle. Like some kind of, I don't know, like a lucky charm.
It's more than just luck. Khalid ibn Walid, he truly believed in the divine power, that barakah that was present in those hairs. He saw it as a source of strength, of protection, not just for him, but for his entire army. Here's where it gets really interesting. During the Battle of Yamama, right in the middle of all the fighting, his cap falls off.
Oh, man. In the middle of a battle, it's the last thing you want. I can't imagine a general risking their life to go back for a lost cap.
But that's exactly what Khalid ibn Walid did. He was so determined to get those hairs back, he risked his life to retrieve that cap. When they asked him about it, you know, why he would do something so reckless, he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that it wasn't about the cap. It was about what it contained, the prophet's hair. He didn't want to be separated from that blessing. And even more importantly, he couldn't bear the thought of it falling into the enemy's hands.
Wow. He was willing to put everything on the line, his life, just to hold on to that connection to the prophet, to keep that little piece of his legacy away from his enemies. It's intense.
Exactly. It shows how important these beliefs were, even in strategic terms. The hair wasn't just a good luck charm for him. It represented something much bigger, something that could influence the entire battle, something worth risking everything for.
It makes you wonder if that belief itself, if it was a kind of psychological warfare. Like, his troops, they see this, their leader's commitment, and they're emboldened. And maybe the enemy, knowing he carries this sacred relic, it shakes them up a bit.
It's an interesting thought for sure. And, these stories, they weren't just limited to the living. This reverence for the prophet's hair, it even extended to death, to the afterlife.
It wasn't just for the living, you're saying. The book mentions something about preparing for the afterlife, right?
Yeah, people would ask to be buried with the prophet's hair. For example, Anas ibn Malik, he was a close companion, served the prophet for years. He requested that when he died, he would be buried with some of the prophet's hair placed under his tongue.
Wow. It's like having that physical connection, even in death, provided a sense of comfort, of peace, hope for a good afterlife.
It's powerful, isn't it? And it wasn't just him. Muawiyah, he was the first ruler of the Umayyad Caliphate, and he also believed that being buried with relics of the prophet, including his hair, would be, beneficial in the afterlife. Even Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he was this incredibly knowledgeable scholar, super pious. He wanted to be buried with the prophet's hairs placed on his mouth and his eyes.
It's like this belief, this hope for that continued connection. It went beyond just social status or even how much religious knowledge you had. It was something shared, something powerful. It makes you think, about how we use physical objects to connect with, history, spirituality, even at the very end. But what about today? It's one thing to read about these things happening centuries ago, but the book, it also talks about what it's like to view the prophet's hair today.
It's true. The book about blessed hairs, it doesn't just stay in the past. It talks about the etiquette involved in seeing these relics even now.
So someone going to see these relics today, what would they expect? What do they do? How do they show respect?
Well, the book really emphasizes approaching these relics with the utmost respect and a pure heart. For one, visitors are expected to be in a state of wudu.
Wudu, that's the ritual washing, right? Like before prayer.
That's right. It's about both physical and spiritual cleanliness, preparing yourself to be in that sacred space.
To be in the presence of something so significant.
Exactly. And that reverence, it extends to every part of the visit. The book talks about staying humble, keeping your gaze lowered, not talking too much or being loud.
Creating that atmosphere of, quiet reflection, respect.
Yes, exactly. It's very much like being in a mosque, during prayer time.
And speaking of prayer, are there specific prayers people say when they visit?
You're spot on with that mosque comparison.
Mm-hmm.
The book specifically mentions reciting Salatus Salam. It's a prayer asking for blessings and peace upon the prophet.
A way to express that love, that reverence while you're there with something so close to him.
Absolutely.
It's interesting, the book also mentions that people shouldn't turn their backs towards the relics. Even something like that, the direction you're facing.
It's a small thing, but it speaks volumes.
A very physical sign of respect. As we've been talking about these stories, from what people did with the prophet's hair back then to how people act around it today, it makes you think about the bigger picture,
Yeah.
What does all this reverence tell us about faith, about devotion, not just in Islam, but in any religion?
It's a question worth asking. This need to connect with something bigger than ourselves, something sacred. And often we do that through physical objects. It's not unique to Islam. Think about other religions. In Christianity, they have relics of the true cross. Many faiths have sacred texts.
So it's not about worshiping the object itself, it's about what it represents.
Right. Those feelings it evokes.
Yeah.
That connection. It's about bridging that gap between the physical world and your spiritual beliefs. It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It really is. It's been fascinating to dive into this, to learn about this aspect of faith and devotion. Makes you think about the things in your own life, the things that have meaning beyond what they actually are.
Those things that connect us to something bigger.
Exactly. It's been a really eye-opening deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, keep exploring those connections, those things that make you think, that enrich your understanding of everything.